I would now like to welcome our witnesses for our meeting today. From the Government of Northwest Territories, the Honorable R.J. Simpson, MLA and Premier of the Northwest Territories. Welcome, sir. And from the Government of Nunavut, the Honorable John Main, Premier of Nunavut. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions from my colleagues. And I now invite His Excellency.
Just before, Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
All parties had a conversation, and we would appreciate if you could add one 5-minute round for MP Laurie Idlout in the first round, please.
That's noted. Yes, welcome, Honourable Member. I now invite Premier Simpson to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me here today to appear in front of the committee and speak on Canada's Arctic policy and Canada's Arctic foreign policy in particular. Sovereignty is not something that can be declared. It needs to be built through presence, partnership, and sustained investment. From that perspective, Canada's Arctic foreign policy is more than just a diplomatic document. It's a call for the country to meet its words with action. The government of the Northwest Territories was actively engaged in the development of Canada's Arctic foreign policy. I met several times with then Minister Jolie. My colleagues and I appreciated her efforts to meet Northerners where they're at, including visiting the Northwest Territories and engaging with premiers in Iqaluit. The policy's emphasis on partnership with Indigenous governments and territorial governments reflects that work, and the final document shows that Northern voices were heard. Since the policy's release, Canada has experienced political transition and rapid geopolitical change. The Arctic is at the center of Canada's strategic future. What happens or fails to happen in the NWT will determine whether Canada can meet its security, sovereignty, and foreign policy objectives in the North. A secure Arctic is not achieved through military presence alone. It's achieved through thriving communities, reliable infrastructure, economic opportunity, and engaged Indigenous leadership. Canada's foreign policy correctly places people at its core. Implementation must continue to recognize Indigenous governments and territorial governments not as stakeholders, but as domestic and international partners. Remember, Indigenous sovereignty is inherent. Canada's sovereignty is built. In the Northwest Territories, the greatest barrier to fully realizing the ambitions of the Arctic foreign policy is the same barrier we face across all areas of development: the lack of infrastructure and the extraordinarily high cost of doing business in remote regions. These are not abstract challenges. They affect housing availability, energy reliability, and economic participation. The NWT has much to offer through deeper Arctic-to-Arctic relationships, which has been recently reinforced through a visit to Yellowknife by the heads of mission of Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and just last week, our participation in the Arctic Symposium hosted by the Nordic Five here in Ottawa. Our shared interests with regions like Greenland and Nordic countries include climate adaptation, sustainable resource development, Indigenous rights, and cultural continuity. These relationships must continue to be a cornerstone of Canada's Arctic engagement. That being said, our physical connections to other Arctic regions are limited and inefficient. There are no direct transportation corridors linking the Western and Eastern Arctic, or connecting the territories to each other in a meaningful way. To travel from Yellowknife to Alaska, you have to go through southern Canada. To connect with Nordic countries, options are seasonal or indirect. And actually, to visit Iqaluit and Whitehorse, I had to become premier. I had never been to either other territory until just a couple years ago. These gaps weaken Canada's economic resilience and limit its strategic reach. This is why a key focus of my government is on major infrastructure priorities: advancing the Mackenzie Valley Highway, developing the Arctic Economic and Security Corridor, and reducing the cost of energy, which remains the highest in the country. These are nation-building investments that increase affordability, enable trade, support population stability, and strengthen Canada's Arctic presence. Canada's Arctic foreign policy recognizes that attracting direct foreign investment into Northern and Indigenous communities is essential to closing the infrastructure gap, and I agree. That gap is simply too large for any one government to carry alone. But foreign investment must be strategic, aligned with Canada's interests, and grounded in strong partnerships with territorial and Indigenous governments. Further, strengthening Arctic sovereignty and security must go hand in hand with improving the lives of Northerners. Investments in housing, energy, climate resilience, critical minerals, healing and wellness, and transportation infrastructure are not separate from sovereignty. They are how sovereignty is exercised. Canada now has a clear international vision for the Arctic, one that the NWT sees itself in. Our challenge is turning that vision into action. Global attention is shifting northward, geopolitics is changing. The Arctic is no longer peripheral, it is central. The federal government understands this moment. The question now is whether we will meet it together. The people of the North are a great asset to Canada. By working in true partnership across governments, Canada will build a secure, prosperous, and sovereign Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. I now invite Premier Main to make introductory remarks for up to 5 minutes.
Matnai Kivota. Thank you, Chair. And thanks for that invitation to appear at this committee meeting, especially alongside my colleague, Northwest Territories Premier Simpson, this afternoon to speak on the Canada's Arctic strategy. It's more apparent than ever that Arctic security and sovereignty have become a global concern. The geopolitical uncertainty around Greenland, who are our neighbors to the east, the closest point between Nunavut and Greenland, I believe, is around 26 kilometers. It's once again put a spotlight on the urgency to protect and invest in Canada's Arctic. The Nunavut Arctic Security and Sovereignty Strategy outlines that Indigenous peoples, Inuit in our case, and inhabitants of the Arctic must be the key architects of any strategy, policy, framework, or action plan about the region. That includes ensuring that there are sufficient investments and expansions in the very basic infrastructure that will bring us in line with national standards and expectations. It should come as no surprise to anyone that Nunavut is critically underfunded in this regard. For Nunavut, this is not simply physical infrastructure needed to be able to defend our territory. It's the recognition and commitment to invest in human security. Nunavummiut must, which means Nunavut residents, they must have their basic needs met. Access to safe, affordable housing, and reliable, affordable food supplies, healthcare, education, and training closer to home. The cost of living in the territory is simply not sustainable. We welcome federal programs like the Canada Groceries and Essentials Benefit, which help. But those programs don't necessarily put into account the huge discrepancy in cost differences between southern and Arctic communities for food staples. Another example of a federal program that doesn't fit well in the Arctic context for Nunavut is the clean fuel regulations. Under the carbon tax, because there was recognition that the territory didn't have many alternatives to diesel use, Nunavut had a carve-out, an exemption for fuel used in power generation, for flights north, and for heating. We need the federal government to continue to recognize unique challenges we face and adapt programs accordingly. Mr. Chair, 1 in 4 Nunavummiut identify as being part of the hidden homeless. 44% of people in Nunavut are severely food insecure. How can we explore national Arctic security without ensuring the people of the Arctic are safe and secure themselves? We need to ensure that history does not repeat itself. The legacy of the Cold War and the dew line sites that still have a footprint in some of our communities remind us that we need to learn from past mistakes and do better. I'm here today to advocate for the human aspect of security in Nunavut and across the Arctic as the federal government develops its Canadian Arctic strategy. However this strategy is finalized, it must include provisions to invest in Nunavummiut. There must be commitments and investments to raise their quality of life, not just for geopolitical safety, but to keep the promises made in the name of truth and reconciliation. Nunavut communities and Nunavut residents need to be strong and resilient to defend the Arctic. I encourage members of this committee to balance the realities of conventional security with a commitment to the people of the region. Let's invest in them as much as in the ways we procure and transform our national defense strategies. Any dual use and major projects to this end should include conditions to create opportunity and betterment for Nunavut and their communities. As I mentioned, we need to acknowledge the real and painful history around Arctic sovereignty and avoid the mistakes of the past by listening. Nunavut are the knowledge keepers. They have the lived experiences, knowledge of, and stewardship of the land, and hold the expertise needed. Let Northern voices guide you, and let Nunavut be given access to the same support, standards, and opportunities to thrive as other Canadians. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the members of the committee for their attention and commitment to understanding the complexities of Nunavut and the Arctic as you work on this critical strategy. I appreciate your time and the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you to both the premiers for their opening statements. We will now go to questions from the floor, beginning with MP Michael Chong. You have 6 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both of our witnesses for appearing in front of us today. I noted in your opening remarks you mentioned infrastructure and the need for infrastructure. So today I'd like to focus my questions on highways in the north. Since 1988, Canada has had a national highway system. It was first endorsed and defined by the Council of Ministers. But when you actually look at what that highway system is, particularly in the north, it's a bunch of gravel roads. That's part of our national highway system. This is all data from Transport Canada's website. And so I looked at our national highway system in Northwest Territory, for example, and I note that it goes to Wrigley, and it goes to Yellowknife, and it goes to Inuvik. And first of all, I'm wondering if you could tell us the highway to Wrigley, what exactly is that highway? Is it paved or unpaved? Because for the benefit of people watching, according to the latest data I have, about 1,687 kilometers of our national highway system is gravel. It's unpaved. That's what is defined as part of our national highway system. So I'm wondering, this part of our national highway system to Wrigley, what is it? Is it a paved surface? Is it unpaved? Is it 2-lane, one in each direction, or multi-lane? What is that highway?
Thank you. So the highway to Wrigley, it's chip sealed for part of it, and part of it is gravel. When you come into the territory, it's chip sealed, and it's 2 lanes the entire way. There have been efforts made to widen the highway, especially coming out from Alberta, but there's very few sections where you would say we actually have shoulders.
Okay, so and the highway to Yellowknife, is that paved or unpaved?
Chip sealed.
Chip sealed as well. And is it 1 lane in each direction?
Yes.
And the highway to Inuvik at the north end of your territory, is that paved or unpaved, and is that 1 lane in each direction?
It is 1 lane in each direction. It's chip sealed, and the Dempster Highway, it comes out of the Yukon. So on our side of the border, I understand it's a pretty good highway. On the Yukon side, it's the exit to their territory, far away from their major center. So I think there's a little less maintenance on that side.
And is it largely gravel at that point?
Yeah,
or is
it's gravel.
Okay, it's gravel, and that's part of our national highway system, folks. And I note in Nunavut, in the mainland part of Nunavut, there is no part of our national highway system, and our national highway system ends in Flin Flon, Manitoba, and in Thompson, Manitoba. That's the furthest north it gets, south of Nunavut. And so, as far as I can see, there is no part of our national highway system in the territory of Nunavut. Is that correct, Mr. Main?
Yes, you're correct. It's quite an unfortunate fact that, in Nunavut, many of the basic pieces of infrastructure, such as highways, simply don't exist. The closest, in terms of the mainland portion of Nunavut. The closest we can get in terms of land transport would be the railhead, which ends at Churchill. Okay. And I believe at one point there were plans or desires to extend beyond Churchill, but that was scrapped many years ago.
And just so for benefit of the members of the committee and for people watching, this isn't just a northerner problem. I noted in the latest data on Transport Canada's website that there are 245 kilometers of our national highway system in the province of Quebec that are unpaved, and there are 332 kilometers of our national highway system in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador that are unpaved. So I think clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done in connecting northern and remote communities to infrastructure. I think our lack of east-west and north-south infrastructure within our own country is increasingly revealing the vulnerabilities of our national economy in light of what's been happening with the threats that have been coming from our largest trading partner and ally. And, I fully support your call for more infrastructure for the north, particularly paved highways. I think that's really important. The modern economy runs on transport trucks and intermodal cargo containers, and I think part of the reason why things are so expensive in the north is that we can't get product there very easily, and often, particularly in the case of Nunavut, it has to come by plane. And that, I think, explains in part why things are so terribly expensive up north. Look, this is a welcome debate that we're going to have here, and so I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the words of support, and we would, we welcome any infrastructure investment into those basics, and paved. In terms of where we are right now, even gravel would be a huge jump forward for us. So pavement,
Sir, I agree with you, and I remember reading about E.P. Taylor's first subdivision in Don Mills and the construction of that subdivision, and at the time people were talking about the construction of the 401, and the criticism of the 401 at the time was that it was going to be built too far outside of the city. It was too far north of the city of Toronto to be a good highway. And so my view on this stuff is build it and they will come. If we build highways from the north to the south that are proper four-lane divided, limited access highways, I believe things will naturally flow from those kinds of projects.
Thank you very much. We're out of time for that question, so we'll go next to MP Rob Oliphant. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Premiers, for being here. It's a privilege for us to have you here. I'm not going to get too much into roads. I've driven on most of them, and I give me a good gravel road over a bad paved road any day. The shale on the Dempster Highway. If you want to drive with me, sometimes anyone is welcome, but there's only room for one passenger because the back seat's full of spare tires. That's what you do, and you just assume your windshield will never be the same. When most Canadians look at a map of Canada, they look at the demographic centres and the population along the southern border, and our minds go there. When I look at the map of Canada, Arviat is in the centre. If you go from Pond Inlet in the top to Point Pelee in southern Ontario, from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, or Whitehorse, which is west of Victoria, you're from the centre of Canada. And it really is something we have to get in our southern Canadian minds. And I think that right now what is happening with the geopolitical world we're in, with the threats on our sovereignty, which we are hearing daily, I would have worries on both sides and in the middle. And those are the threat with respect to Greenland sovereignty, which then does remind us of the vulnerability in Nunavut. But also critical minerals. We don't have the Premier of Yukon here, but we have challenges from Alaska into Yukon, and we have Chinese challenges in the middle and critical minerals and mining. So right now, I think the North is on Canadians' minds. And so we're looking for more input on our foreign policy and how Canada engages in the world with your input. With respect to that, part of our Arctic foreign policy, which came out of the strategic document from 2019, is to have a better relationship with both the territorial governments as well as the Indigenous governments. And I am wondering, are we doing better at that in engaging you on issues that matter to all of Canada, or can we do better? And if so, how could we do better to get your full participation? We've had Indigenous leaders here from the North as well, but now we have the territorial governments. So particularly, how can we maybe structurally engage your governments in thoughtful discourse on the world stage? Premier Simpson, Premier Main.
No, thank you for that. When I think about how we as a territory can work with Canada to engage internationally, I'm sometimes at a loss because we're in a situation where we don't have international exports. I mean diamonds, but that's not something that the territory government controls. We don't, and when I hear other jurisdictions talk about how they're working with other countries, they're going on trade missions, we're not there yet. We don't have highways, as was just discussed. And so that's the area where I find it difficult to talk about international relations, because we're still trying to get our foundation built in the North as part of Canada, let alone go out to other countries. But in terms of the engagement with the federal government, I will say that the current administration has been engaging heavily with us, and I feel like we are now being heard, being listened to. We just met with Minister McKinnon to talk about the Arctic Infrastructure Fund and what that should look like. So these things are being listened to at this point, and some more formalization around that relationship might be appreciated, but we're off to a great start, I would say.
Yeah, I would echo those comments in terms of recent approaches to engaging with the Nunavut government. It's encouraging. My understanding is there's been a bit of a change in tone, and like you mentioned, there's more focus at the moment on the Arctic. And in terms of that inclusive approach to democracy, which is named in the Arctic foreign policy, and involving Inuit voices, it's very, very much in line with what we as a public government espouse, in terms of we want to make sure that Inuit organizations within Nunavut are given the proper space and recognition, and we really view Inuit organizations as our partners in pretty much everything we do. And the only thing I wanted to add is I keep on hearing that the Arctic is having a moment. The Arctic is having a moment, and my concern is that that moment will pass, and that what we really need is sustained engagement, sustained investment. You can't undo decades of underinvestment with a moment. You need to counter that with a sustained, well planned out plan to build up the North as it should be.
Can I ask a little bit about the Arctic Council, which is our premier platform that we use? We have suspended the membership of Russia because of its aggression in Ukraine. We have 6 permanent partners who are Indigenous groups. Is there a way for Canada to engage? I just look at the presidency right now. The chair is with the Kingdom of Denmark. They've really given it to Greenland to operate as the chair. Is there a way we can involve the territorial governments in the Arctic Council in more meaningful ways than we have in the past?
Brief response, please, because we're running out of time.
I haven't gone to any meetings, and it could just be I'm in my second year, and the opportunity hasn't arisen yet, so can't really speak too much about that.
Yeah. I would just simply state that we're open to considering ways to engage with the Arctic Council. I'm fairly new to the role of Premier, so I can't speak much in terms of past engagements.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Duceppe, vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Let me give our witnesses time to put on their headsets. Is everything okay? You can hear me? Great. Thank you very much for being here. It's important for us to have you with us. Mr. Simpson and Mr. Main did something that has been highlighted from the beginning of this study. It's one thing to invest in the Arctic to reinforce military presence and security, but let's not forget that the investments that should go to communities are even more important. So I would like to know your vision. To what extent is it important to reinforce the communities on your territories in light of the new investments that the federal government wants to make or promises to make?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. So we have national security, which is I see as the hard security, and then we have human security, which I think is often equated to sovereignty. And to me, sovereignty is seeing strong, vibrant communities. No one will ever question if the Strait of Georgia the Georgia Strait between Vancouver Island and the mainland is international waters. It's built up. There's communities there. There's people there. So it's important that we do that. And in the territories, we have a long way to go. There's a lot of trauma in the territories. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of underinvestment in basic infrastructure, inability of residents to access basic health care. And that's really what we focus on, creating economic opportunities. So there's infrastructure investment, very necessary, and complementary to that is the investment in the human security aspects.
Yeah, I would echo those comments, and thank you for asking that question. You visit a Nunavut community, you will see with your own eyes issues around drinking water, issues around basic infrastructure like roads, marine infrastructure, power generation, schools, health facilities. So we have a long list of infrastructure priorities that are needed to bring Nunavut up to a standard on par with the southern Canada.
That's one of my fears. We've heard a lot about the international geopolitical situation, and it becomes sometimes a pretext to put the cart before the horse, as we say here in Quebec. Focusing on major projects, sometimes it's a political pitch. In the meantime, there are communities and people who may need something else before that. So it's in that sense. We feel that we've not had many infrastructure projects from the 60s and 70s in the Arctic. So the federal government seems to have lost interest in that area, and that has gone on for a long time. So you said so, Mr. Simpson, a while ago. You don't know if they will continue their interest in the Arctic. And why was the federal government disinterested in the Arctic? And what can we learn from that so that the situation doesn't recur?
I can't speak for the federal government, but I think the fact that we have one MP in the Northwest Territories and only one MP in each of the territories probably has a lot to do with it. And you're correct, there was investment in the 50s, 60s, 70s. There was even plans in the 70s to do big, large-scale investments, but those have fallen off. And I would also say part of the reason is because it is an expensive jurisdiction to do business in. If the government wants to build something, if businesses want to go in and do something, it just costs more. And there's always a more attractive place to put those investment dollars. But with that attitude, we wind up where we are, where there's not even an opportunity to generate wealth and prosperity in the territory.
Yeah, I think, to build on those comments, I think what's really needed and what's in some ways the most difficult aspect to it is that you're not going to be able to make changes overnight. And if you make big investments in roads and ports and energy generation or transmission, it will take a long time for those investments to pay off and to be built. And I'm a politician, I think we can sometimes take the short-term view in terms of the next 4 years. And what's needed, and that's what I was trying to get at earlier, we need more than a moment. We need decades. And we need the Team Canada approach. We need that Team Canada approach to apply to the Arctic. It needs to be as non-partisan as possible. That would be my preference, to see that sustained focus and investment in the North, which is a huge part of our Canadian identity.
J'aime ça quand j'entends parler de souveraineté.
I like hearing about sovereignty. Of course, I'm from the Bloc Québécois. So we may become great allies if Quebec regains its sovereignty, but that's a whole other subject. Now, with the time left, the most important investments that you may want, do you have concrete examples of projects which, in your opinion, should be implemented as a priority? Do you think that the federal government listens to you, hears you, when you present projects which you believe should be a priority?
Just over time.
Yeah, I'll speak to one project that is, and I'll speak to it because it is, we're almost there, and that's the Mackenzie Valley Highway, and that would be the highway that would connect from Wrigley all the way up to the Arctic Ocean to Inuvik, and that would serve to lower costs for the residents in that region who I think face the highest costs in Canada. It would connect families, connect communities, and open up resource development, exploration and development opportunities. So in terms of things that you can get the most bang for your buck most quickly, I would say the Mackenzie Valley Highway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will go next to MP Laurie Idlut. Thank you for joining us today. You have 5 minutes.
First of all, thank you so much for including me in this important committee today with the witnesses. Welcome as well to the both of you. I think that it's wonderful to see that you're sharing such common issues between the NWT and Nunavut, and to hear you saying the same things that I've been saying since I was elected in 2021. It means that what you've shared with us today in committee is not just something that I've come up with by myself. It's something that is pervasive and very important. We've heard, for example, that there was a time when investments were much higher, and we saw these investments going to housing and keep securing the Arctic. I think that we need to make it very clear that the Arctic has already been secured by Canada, and what we need to focus on is keeping it, especially with climate change and the opening of the Northwest Passage, and with the potential for other countries wanting to use the Northwest Passage. And the purpose of foreign affairs, when you think about it, why are we focusing on infrastructure projects in this study? I think that some of the examples that we've heard from our constituents is that our constituents basically live in fourth world conditions, where we live in a first world country, yet we have our constituents living in third world state. And I wonder if you can express a bit more strongly why you're pushing so hard for more infrastructure projects, basic needs, both of you. John, if you may.
Thanks for that. We're here from, I had my cabinet colleagues here with me this week, and at various points during the week, it struck me that, a lot of what we are advocating for are the very basics. And I mentioned them earlier, they're the very basics. And like what I answered, gravel roads would be a huge leap ahead for us. And adequate modern drinking water infrastructure for all communities in Nunavut, there are 25, would be a huge leap ahead. And I think the reason we're pushing so strongly or making sure that there's this awareness is that my concern is that the Arctic could be looked at as a blank canvas, or it could be looked at simply in terms of borders and defense. And you made a very good point in your preamble that the Arctic is already secured. There are already Inuit living in the Arctic, as there have been for thousands of years and will be into the future. So we need to recognize those terrible conditions that exist in many of our communities. We need to recognize that those conditions can be changed, and that we can catch more than one ptarmigan with one bullet in terms of defense interests, community interests around human security, as well as economic interests, economic development. So thank you for the question.
Oh, thank you, and I'll say that we're pushing hard so that Northerners can have the same opportunities as people in the rest of Canada. I think things are taken for granted elsewhere, things like roads. You see the highway and the rail system from east to west, the economic opportunities that created. That's what we're looking for, is economic opportunities and a standard of living that is on par with the rest of Canada. And I understand we're rural, we're remote, we're not going to have all of the services you would find in a city, but we, as you mentioned, a lot of the services are substandard, and we need to do better in Canada. Thank you.
And more specifically to Premier Main, just a couple of examples that the federal government had promised to invest in that are not completed projects yet, like the Arctic Bay Marine Infrastructure Port, the Qikiqtarjuaq Marine Port. I wonder if you could share with us how important the completion of those ports would mean for Nunavut, and how Canada could show that it will defend the Arctic by investing in these projects, as well, thirdly, in airport infrastructure. I know that reliability in the north is quite reduced because of the lack of infrastructure for weather stations and what pilots must rely on to be able to make sure that they can continually land in all the 25 fly-in communities only, and how important it is to make sure that we're getting those investments to increase that reliability to help reduce the cost of fly-in communities that we're suffering in with all the cost of living in the north.
Quick responses, if possible.
Thank you. So briefly, in terms of aviation, thanks for highlighting that. It is a key need. We only have a couple of our airports that are paved, or the airstrips that are paved. And so in terms of paved versus gravel, there's that issue. Maintenance of airstrips, as well as lengthening them, would benefit transport as well as cost of living in some instances. And in terms of marine infrastructure, that's an area where we want to see more investment. We see it as dual use or multi-use in terms of benefiting defense interests, community interests, as well as economic benefit from the fisheries.
Thank you. We are going to the second round of questions, beginning with MP Abul Taif. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Premiers, for appearing before committee today. Premier Simpson, in September 2025, you said that, or you made the argument that North is already shaping Canada's future in 4 ways: sovereignty and security through permanent presence, viable communities and military infrastructure, critical minerals, indigenous economic self-determination, and climate resilience. The question to Premier Main, do you agree to that? Are you on the same page with Premier Simpson?
More or less on the broad strokes, yes. We're wanting to see a balanced approach. I think in terms of infrastructure or in terms of funding efforts, we can't just focus on one aspect of the needs and use it, check the box and say, okay, we'll move off. This is a multifaceted problem, and it's created over a long time. My belief is that there's a long pattern of underinvestment, and to solve that, it takes a sustained effort over time, balanced investment in different areas in our communities.
Thank you. Premier Simpson, do you believe that the federal government is on the same page with you, with your vision?
Yes, I do. I've had great meetings with the Prime Minister and other ministers as well, Minister Chartrand, Minister McGuinty, and I do feel as though that we are all on the same page, and I have a pretty big vision for the territory, what it could look like in the future. I recognize our opportunities, and to realize that vision, it's going to take some major investments, and I feel as though those major investments are in the pipes.
So short-term, mid-term, and long-term. On the short-term, do you see that the vision of the federal government is within your vision yourself, and that there's something can be quickly done to make sure the territories are looked after, because right now they are the center of our sovereignty issue?
Yeah, I think that right now there's a lot of money allocated for defense, and I know there was a pre-procurement notice that came out today and it had some big dollars attached to it for the Northwest Territories. So there's an opportunity where the federal government is advancing their vision and an opportunity for economic benefit to the people of the territory if it's done right. As well, we have some other big projects that I expect in the short term are going to advance.
Can you name one of the projects that you believe that will go first to the territories?
The Mackenzie Valley Highway is certain sections are already permitted. We're wrapping up the phase 1 environmental assessment. It's good to go immediately.
On a military basis, the question to both of you, of course, when do you feel, what the time frame you think we can have a military presence in the Arctic? Since Premier Maine, I believe you said that 44% of the people out there feel unsafe. The question to both of you, do you both feel unsafe being there? And do you believe that military presence can be coming as soon as you expected and the people expected to be?
Yeah, maybe just to clarify, the 44% was in terms of food insecurity. That's what I mentioned in my comments. So in terms of military presence, the existing footprint in Iqaluit is going to be augmented, I believe, in terms of, you're asking what's the timeline or Northern Operational Support Hub to be developed in Iqaluit. Is I believe at the front of the queue. We welcome additional investments into additional communities, so that just like in southern Canada, we have regional centers or larger communities that have more infrastructure and more resources and generally more wealth, and then we have the outlying communities which are more disadvantaged economically and in terms of infrastructure. So we welcome investment that's balanced geographically across the territory.
Premier Simpson, the question to you too, and the same thing.
No, I don't feel unsafe, and I think part of the reason for that is that if you look at the Arctic, no one's invading the Arctic and coming over the top. There's an old saying that if the Russians invaded, the first thing we'd have to do is send out a rescue party. It's not an inviting landscape for that type of operation. But in terms of how soon, we have the headquarters for Joint Task Force North in Yellowknife. We have a forward operating location in Nunavut, and there's already work happening there. And I know there's more work coming as well. We have Operation Nanook, which is the military exercises that happen in the Arctic, and those are being expanded from what I understand.
One final question. Any specific item where there's disagreement with the federal government on any issues up there? Both to you, 10 seconds each if you can, please.
Brief responses.
Agreement with the federal government at this point in time. Things are pretty collegial. I'm very encouraged with the overall direction in terms of the actions that will follow the words. I think that's where we'll be watching very closely, and if we do run into any areas where we don't agree with the approach, we're going to make sure we voice those. But at this point, there's nothing that comes to mind.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go next to MP Mona Fortier. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you so much for being here and sharing in person, of course, and showing us the needs, but also the realities that you have in the North. I have this dream to go one day. I have not had the privilege of going to Nunavut, but I have been to Yellowknife, so experienced a short time, and it is very different. And I think Canadians need to learn that there are two realities. There's the North and the South, and we can't just copy paste and send it up north. So thank you for sharing more today. We were all very surprised to hear, of course, President Trump trying to take some space into the Greenland territory. And I was wondering, what's the mood in Northwest Territories and in Nunavut? How are people looking at what's happening with the South and our southern neighbor, and how we are positioning ourselves, of course, for sovereignty, for security? But what's the mood on the ground in your territories?
In terms of Greenland, I'll qualify my response and say, I'm not an expert or an authority when it comes to foreign policy. Obviously, that's a federal function that we respect, and we work closely with our federal partners in that regard. The mood regarding Greenland, from what I can gather, is a mix of concern, anger, and also solidarity with Greenland. Obviously, there's strong cultural links between Inuit in Nunavut and Inuit in Greenland. I myself am not Inuk, I'm non-Indigenous, but there's those cultural links, there's ancestral links, there's links in terms of language, and so they're our neighbors, and it's very unsettling for us in a general sense to be hearing that type of talk.
And I can say that, Nunavut is much closer to Greenland, obviously, but it did bring things a little close to home. Anytime you talk about armed conflict on your borders, it is concerning. I actually know someone who's a bit of a pacifist. They went out and they booked an appointment to get their firearms license. So some people are taking this very, very seriously, and we see the escalation. And I just want to comment on something you said earlier. You can't copy and paste what works in southern Canada and put it in the north. And that's the one message I always try to hammer home to the feds. Think about the north and understand the fact that that is the reality. You can't do it. So always have something that is tailored to the north if you want it to work. Thank you.
There's a lot, the Arctic is experiencing a lot of change. We are, witnessing today the needs for infrastructure, the needs for more support in food security, also helping, also working with Indigenous peoples. Protecting also with climate change being what it's doing, protecting the land. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you see how we need to protect the environment right now in Northwest Territories and Nunavut?
In terms of protecting the environment, I mean, we could go on, we could have a standalone meeting on this alone, but one thing that we'd like to do in Nunavut is to reduce our carbon footprint in terms of our power generation. Right now we have 25 standalone microgrids. We're burning diesel 24/7 in all of our communities. We're moving towards more renewables. We'll have our first solar farm, community-scale solar farm coming online in Nauyat in the coming months, so it's very exciting for us. That's an example of, we realize that diesel fuel is not the lowest carbon option. And one other item I'll mention very briefly in terms of dealing with climate change, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is resilient and built properly to spec so that it can deal with things like shifting permafrost, so that it's protected against sudden floods. So that's another huge area that we're dealing with.
So I would say when your house is on fire, you don't worry so much about how you're going to fire smart and what sort of siding you're going to use. You're worried about putting the fire out. And we're sort of in that position in the territory. We had back-to-back years in 22 and 23 of the biggest natural disasters in the territory's history. The Great Slave Lake, I live on the shores of the Great Slave Lake, one of the biggest lakes in the world, had its highest water level on record in 2022 and the lowest water level on record in 2023. 2022, we had a massive flood in my community. 2023, 70% of the territory was evacuated due to wildfires. And so we do have very strong environmental standards in the territory, but we're at the point where we need to manage our environment. We need to do fire smarting and things like that. So it really is about that resilience and ensuring we have appropriate infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Next, we have MP Duceppe. You have 2.5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, je pense que c'est tout à fait légitime que je laisse...
Mr. Chair, I would like to yield my turn to Madam Laria.
Thank you so much, Alexis, for sharing your time. I really appreciate it. I do want to ask about a specific project that's been supported by the Nunavut Association of Municipalities, who drew up a resolution asking for the federal government to fund a search and rescue base in Senrayak. And I wonder if Premier Maine, if you could speak to that and how that would help keep the Arctic secure and how that could maybe beneficially have better foreign affairs relations, knowing that Canada is doing what it can to keep the Arctic secure.
Thank you. And in terms of the Association of Municipalities, they're an important stakeholder to us as a government. We work with them on any number of different issues, including community, public safety, infrastructure, recreation. So they're an important group, and we do take their resolutions seriously. I'm not going to speak specifically to Sanarayak. I think I'll speak more broadly in terms of the territory as a whole. We recognize that search and rescue capabilities are important, and that safety for harvesters is important. If you look at the map of Nunavut, there's no links in between communities, but there are links. People are traveling back and forth between communities by boat, by snowmobile, and so that's Inuit traditional knowledge that's in action. Those trails do exist, the routes do exist, and so as a government we have an interest in ensuring or wanting to support safety of our residents no matter where they are, and search and rescue is one of those key assets that we do need in every community, so that when emergencies do arise, that human lives and safety can be protected.
If I still have time,
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. Question to both of you. Do you think that the $1 billion Arctic Infrastructure Fund will be enough to help keep the Arctic secure?
I think in terms of the Arctic Infrastructure Fund, it's encouraging to see that fund being allocated, but I think the proof will be in seeing where the money goes and how it's given out. If it's dispersed widely, I doubt that it'll be enough to meet our needs. If it's targeted properly, it's an encouraging first step.
Thank you very much. We next go to MP Cronus. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for being here. This is an incredibly interesting session, and it's also a really important one. And I appreciate your candor and your sharing your experiences with us. One of my nephews is a Rubik's Cube fan. And sometimes when you're sitting there and you can't solve a puzzle, one of the things you need to do is turn the cube around. And the incredible thing about looking at this country from the perspective of the North and from the perspective of the Arctic is that it helps, I think, get us off of the idea that we have one neighbor. Because in the Arctic you have 7 neighbors, and China, which is showing an awfully close interest in the goings-on up there these days. And I was just wondering, while we have you, if you could, and I think that the topics that you're bringing up around quality of life are very, very important. But I thought we might maybe take a bit of a deviation from that on one round. And could you share with us some of the things that you see as you look across the ocean into other countries through your cultural relationships with other Indigenous peoples that are in the northern parts of those countries? And maybe share with us a little bit about really valuable things that those countries are doing in their north that maybe we should consider doing in ours. And happy to have either one of you start and just interesting projects and things that they're doing. How are their norths changing, and what should we be doing to respond?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think if you look around the circumpolar north, circumpolar Arctic, and you look at Nunavut, for example, you'll see just a staggering lack of infrastructure and a staggering lack of investment. I spent a brief time in Norway when I was still a student, and you look at the highway up to Tromsø, extremely expensive for the government, extremely. Engineering-wise, huge challenge. They took it on, it's built, and now there you have a city in the high Arctic which is flourishing. And I think that example, I believe your committee should be looking at these other jurisdictions who have invested in past decades. It didn't happen overnight. They put in place this foundational infrastructure for their north, and they're reaping the rewards. And so that's what we from Nunavut have been advocating for, is these types of foundational investments in terms of building the country north, and it hasn't happened yet. We're looking for it to start sometime soon.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, so I would say that, and I haven't traveled as extensively to the circumpolar world, but I've looked at maps, and I do see the infrastructure on the maps, and there's a notable gap in Canada's Arctic. And when I was down in the United States, in D.C. with the rest of the premiers, I spoke with a lot of our allies down there, and we do have a lot of allies, a lot of representatives, and they express concern that Canada's Arctic is the soft underbelly of North America when it comes to security. And so I think there's ways to do, we need more security infrastructure, but because of, I think, the density of some of the other Arctic nations, the population density, they can do more things with things like education. But once we get that infrastructure in place, then we can start looking at those. But I'll say we do some things well in the north, and I think reconciliation, working with Indigenous peoples, is one of our highlights that we can actually share with the rest of the world. Thank you.
So that was actually going to be my follow-up question, because the impact of development in the north, the impact of investment in the north will inevitably be population growth. And I'm wondering if you're concerned about the special culture of the north in Canada being diluted. I'm wondering what measures or what we can do or what you can do to help to be able to preserve that unique culture and your way of life as that development happens.
I would start by saying I'm not too worried about population growth. You have to be a certain type of person to live in the north, and there's plenty of opportunities. There's more jobs than people already, and we can't get the people to move north, and it's because it's cold, and you got to be, like I said, a certain type of person. But there's a lot that we can do and that we need to do in terms of preserving cultures, education, language, all of those types of things. But given the time, I'll hand it over to Premier Main.
Yeah, as a non-Indigenous person, I'm not really comfortable in answering that question. But in terms of dilution of demographics, and Nunavut is 85% Inuit population, so. In terms of population growth, though, we are already dealing with the challenges. Our communities, some of them, if you look at them per capita, are the most rapidly growing places in all of the country. And it's organic growth, that we have a very high birth rate in our communities. Not all of them, but so that we're dealing with the challenges that come with that in terms of housing, in terms of drinking water, energy, economic opportunity. So we already have that population growth happening. If there are foundational investments in infrastructure that bring more investment and population growth to the north, we will make sure that we're keeping up with that growth. But we would welcome foundational investments in infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to MP Tim Watron. Welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais vous laisser la terre de mettre.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you time to put on your headsets or earpieces. I'll ask my question in French. I had to go to the Foreign Affairs Committee to talk about infrastructure. I'm a civil engineer, and this is something I'm passionate about, infrastructure. I think it's very important that we talk about it. Let me talk about the particular project. Mr. Main, correct me if I don't pronounce it correctly. Nukik-Sutik, that's the hydroelectric project that will help burn less hydrocarbons and transform your energy to electricity. How is this evolving? Is it progressing according to your taste? How will the 20 million investment by the federal government for the analysis of the project, how will that help you?
Thank you for the question. And maybe in terms of how I respond, I'll just state that the Nunavut government is not the proponent of that project. It's being led by an Inuit-owned company, and our energy utility is playing a supporting role. They are engaged, working very closely alongside the proponent. In terms of the need to get off of fossil fuels and our power generation, that need is there. We have 4 major projects that we've identified across Nunavut. 2 of them are port and or road projects, and 2 of them are energy related, so the Iqaluit hydro project as well as Kivadlak hydro fiber link, which would connect us to Manitoba's hydro grid. All of those 4 projects are being led by Inuit companies. And so in terms of economic reconciliation, it's quite striking for us as a territory that we have these major developments that are being led by Inuit owned interests.
Je pense que c'est un modèle également qui devrait être
I also think that's a model that should be replicated. We're seeing it in the West already, and I think it's going to be very productive for local communities. You talked about infrastructure. I'm part of the National Defense Committee, for your information. We decided that we're going to massively invest in defense, $8 billion in the next 5 years and $73 billion in the next 20 years to modernize our defense infrastructure. A while ago, you talked about the dual-use project. What will your priorities be for these dual-use projects? What are your priorities for investments in the North, given these amounts?
I'll start by speaking to that. So when it comes to dual-use infrastructure, and I've had this conversation with Minister McGuinty as well, is that I don't expect the federal government to know what the communities need for dual-use infrastructure, so they need to talk to us. And I don't know what the military needs for their dual-use side of this, the security side. And so there really needs to be collaboration. But if you're having military installations, if you're increasing their presence in communities, we probably need better municipal roads, an upgrade to the water treatment plant, maybe more community facilities for recreation and things like that. So that's really where I see the dual-use infrastructure, as well as the things like airports, runways, and those are more the typical D&D things that they would like to see.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to encourage them that there's more to that than just airports. Thank you.
Premier Bain.
Thank you for the question. In terms of transportation infrastructure like ports, roads, power generation, water reservoirs, these are the types of things that we see as fitting into the dual use aspect. But we've been having interesting discussions around what part of the dual use needs to come first. Which one is the dog that pulls the sled? Is it the military interest that is the primary driver, and then the civilian is like a little thing that's tacked on the side, or is it the other way around? In terms of how we look at this, and that's where, similar to my colleague, we have been engaged in conversations with Department of National Defense on trying to understand better. We've also been in conversations with our Inuit organization partners in Nunavut in terms of coming to an agreement and putting forward a shared position on this issue.
Thank you very much. We will go next to MP Michael Chong to start the 3rd round of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for appearing. A lot of interesting topics being discussed here. I'd like to talk again about infrastructure because it's come up so much. I'd like to talk a bit about wastewater and water treatment infrastructure. You've got Yellowknife and Hay River and Inuvik in the Northwest Territories. There's in Iqaluit, there's in Nunavut, there's Iqaluit, Kimirut, Pangerton, dozens of other smaller communities. I once hiked across Baffin Island. I started at, flew into Pang, as they say, and then went up the Weasel River. And I was surprised to see in Pangerton that the wastewater treatment and water treatment was all by truck, like moving between each home and the plant. But my understanding is that other communities do it differently. I understand as well that in many parts of the north, communities are exempt from the nationally regulated water and wastewater treatment standards, and that there has been issues with providing safe drinking water and with wastewater effluent discharges and the like. I think in 2021 in Nunavut, in Iqaluit, there was a scare about the water treatment system when I think it got fuel contamination in it. So my specific question is, what needs to be done in your communities, whether it's Hay River or Iqaluit or Yellowknife or Inuvik or Kimirut, Nunavut, Iqaluit, Pangerton, or the other several dozen flying communities, to ensure that people have basic, safe drinking water and that sewage effluent is managed at national standards?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. It's a big issue. Our key concern is around the drinking water. Obviously, the wastewater is a concern for us, or a need, but the top priority in that, between those two, is obviously the drinking water. What we need is sustained infrastructure funds from our federal partners that are flowed to us in a way that's appropriate for our realities. When you look at building a new water treatment plant, one of the communities I represent, Whale Cove, went through, I believe it was 9 years of not constant, but on and off again, boil water advisories. And recently we got a new water treatment plant in there. It's state of the art. And it was done with a component of federal funding. And that federal funding was provided to us in a way that was flexible, didn't have a ton of strings attached, because it's complicated to build infrastructure in Nunavut where we have only shipping available in limited summer months. So that is the way. I mean, we're able to do it as a territorial government in terms of drinking water. We just need access to the quantity of funds we need. Ballpark, the need in Nunavut, 600 million as of today.
So I can say that in Hay River, where I live, we need a water treatment plant. The territory is in a position where a lot of infrastructure was built in the 60s and 70s, and now replacements are coming due. And things are not the same price they used to be, and it was the federal government often paying for it in the past, and we don't have those deeper pockets. In Inuvik, because of the landscape there, they don't have underground services. They have a utilidor, which is basically an above-ground piping system that's enclosed. And I know that they are going through the process of having to replace that piece by piece, and that is tens of millions of dollars. So that's a significant impact for the community. And in places like Yellowknife, underground infrastructure is often just so expensive because it's rock, and so to blast through the rock is cost prohibitive. So, I mean, I guess we would need money is what we need to upgrade all of these things from the old technology. Thanks.
I'll just note there's lots of money flowing from the federal government to municipalities in the south of Canada for wastewater and water treatment systems. I know in my riding and in ridings in the region that I represent in southern Ontario, wastewater and water treatment plants have been funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of federal dollars over the last decade and more. So, the federal government is in the business of funding wastewater and water treatment systems. And I would note that I think it has a particularly unique responsibility to the three territories, because they are not independent sovereign orders of government like the 10 provinces are. They are essentially closer to the federal government and its responsibilities than are the 10 provinces. And yet we fund significantly municipalities and municipal systems in provincial areas of jurisdiction. So, Mr. Chair, just make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to MP Anita van der Beld. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, and thank you very much for being here. There's a number of things that you've said, particularly about the ability to travel in between that I think are very striking for us, so thank you for that. We had some previous testimony about the possibility of development in the north when it comes to AI and data centers. Particularly, it was mentioned that I think the term free cooling, because of course it's cold, and data centers produce a lot of heat, which costs a lot of energy. But then, of course, the first thing that came out was that there would need to be FIBE to be able to do that. I wonder what your opinion is of that. Is that something that would create economic opportunity? Is it something that would be desirable? I would just be very curious to hear your views on that. On data centers and of course, sending FIBE up to the north.
Yeah, and we have a fiber line that runs all the way the length of the Mackenzie Valley, and we just completed a link with the Yukon, so now there should be some redundancy there. And it was made intentionally larger, so it could carry significant amounts of data, because up in Inuvik, there's a satellite station where a lot of data is downloaded and then shipped south. But, if there are jobs associated with these, that would be great, but I know that some of the data centers, you might have 4 jobs. And so we don't necessarily have the power capacity right now. But I know there is interest, say, up in the far north in the Beaufort Delta region, because it is cold much of the year, and they have significant amounts of natural gas, and a natural gas well is coming online. So there is opportunity in the north, but there hasn't been significant discussion, although there has been some. Thanks.
Yeah. And thank you for that question. It gives me an opportunity to just reiterate that we're not connected to Canada in any way. From Nunavut, there's no roads, there's no power lines, no fiber lines. We would like to see those come up. The Nunavut government has multiple projects in the fiber realm. They're subsea cable projects. They're yet to be built, but we have secured some federal funding towards them. And we recognize that connectivity is one of those key ingredients to a better quality of life, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economic development. So we're working towards it.
Thank you. So very important, but maybe not the first priority. Okay. And if it's linked to jobs, I understand. One of the other, we had witnesses previously, and I had mentioned that when you have people in a region who are getting Canadian health care and Canadian social insurance numbers, and that makes it very clear that it is Canadian territory. And somebody said something that really struck me and embarrassed me a little bit, and I've pulled back from that, because one of the witnesses said, well, we have to be careful that we don't treat the people as human flagpoles. And I just wonder, because obviously the people are vitally important, but what is your view on that? Because I did hear you, Premier Main, talk quite a bit about the need for the human security, which frankly I think is extremely important. So if I could just put that to both of you.
Yeah, I think as a non-Indigenous person, I think this is an opportunity for me to state that there are duties that fall to every Canadian in terms of educating ourselves about the terrible history of colonization and how Indigenous people have been treated by the Canadian government in the past. So the history around the high Arctic relocatees who were moved from northern Quebec to the high Arctic, Resolute Bay and Grise Fjord, many of their descendants still live there, and the term human flagpoles is one that they still use today in terms of being relocated from one area to another. And there is, I think, a general sense, from the territorial government, general sense that we want to see investment, that the federal government does have a duty that they need to fulfill, particularly to Inuit. We see that with issues around the non-insured health benefits program, which is chronically underfunded. There is a duty that the federal crown in that case, and it's not being fulfilled, in our opinion, in terms of the quantity of funds towards essential healthcare services for Inuit.
MP Duceppe, you have 2.5 minutes next.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Des fois,
Thank you, Chair. Sometimes there's dissonance between what is being said in Ottawa about the territory and the experiences going on that territory. Now, when we talk about the Arctic in Ottawa, we hear territorial sovereignty, defense, we hear China, Russia, Donald Trump, and Greenland. That is what is being said in Ottawa right now. I'm not saying it is wrong, but I think you are best placed, given that you represent the people from those territories. You're best placed to tell us what is really being experienced in your respective territories. When you run into people in the grocery stores, are they saying the same thing that we're hearing in Ottawa? That's my question, because I don't have much time.
We'll say that, we are still Canadians in the Northwest Territories, and we do say a lot of the same things. We talk about Greenland, we talk about the United States, but when you're in the grocery store, we're also talking about the prices, because I'm in the most southern community in the territory, and groceries are probably 30% higher than just across the border in Alberta. And Yellowknife, the prices are a little better, but in most communities, when I go into communities, I don't know how people afford to live there. There's a lot of harvesting on the land. People go out and hunt and supplement their diets because I would say in many cases it would be almost impossible to survive if you just go to the grocery store. So while we do talk about these other bigger issues, there's a lot more focus on people's day-to-day lives and just being able to pay their rent and buy groceries.
Yeah, I would echo those comments. At the grocery store, people are talking about the cost of food. People are talking about housing. People are talking about needing to find employment, schooling, healthcare. These are the essentials of life that we're talking about. And, we are challenged. Our communities are challenged. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You come up to Nunavut, you travel to any of our communities, you'll see, for your own eyes, you'll see the challenges that are facing our residents every day. And that's why we come here to Ottawa. We come here to remind, to educate, and to invite our partners up to Nunavut, and look forward to welcoming committee members to Nunavut too, if they ever should come up.
And I was very lucky in my first parliament to have successfully got the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee to come both to Nunavut and to the NWT, and they are very impactful visits. And I do invite the Foreign Affairs Committee to come to a place in Nunavut, specifically maybe Grise Fiord or Resolute. Some of your questions I hear directly from constituents like Larry Outlaluk, who lives in Grise Fiord, that needs reassurances from this government that he will be protected, that he will have some role in protecting the Arctic. And I wonder if you could just summarize for us why it's so important that it's the people of the Arctic that help keep the Arctic secure and not just the military flying in, to the both of you, maybe.
Very brief response, please.
Important because it's what we've heard from our partners in the Inuit organizations. It's embodied, it's included in our Arctic security and sovereignty strategy. There needs to be ownership, there needs to be supports and benefits for Nunavummiut and for Inuit through security and sovereignty. It can't be something that's imposed on us from the south. It needs to be done in cooperation, collaboration with the people of Nunavut, and that's what we're looking for in terms of our federal government and the investments that are ahead.
Thank you very much. Next we go to MP Cronis. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to get the chance to continue the conversation with you. We've talked a lot about, we've talked a bit about the outward looking, we've talked a little bit about the infrastructure needs. I wanted to ask you about the people, and I specifically wanted to ask you about your youth and the challenges that are facing your communities right now. Because, in my riding, in my communities, I talk to youth who are struggling. And I can only imagine how much that gets amplified when you add in sort of the extreme isolation and remoteness compared to, I mean, Vancouver Island sometimes feels really far away, and it's comparatively close sometimes in a lot of ways. What is and of course, one of the biggest issues in my community is the addictions crisis. And I'm wondering what that looks like in your communities. And I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit and to talk about what your needs are. Because, you know, we used to have a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. We don't have that anymore under this government. And I wanted to give you the chance to speak about it. Thank you.
I will say that when it comes to the youth, and there's a lot of successful youth. I don't want to paint everyone with the same paintbrush. We have a lot of very successful youth who go on to become doctors and lawyers and all of these things. But intergenerational trauma is the biggest challenge that we face in the Northwest Territories, I would say. Half of our population is Indigenous. We have the highest proportion of residential school survivors in Canada. And the longer I'm in this job, the more I see intergenerational trauma, its manifestations across all aspects of life. And that includes things like addictions and drugs. And especially in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of interest from organized crime, organized gangs who come up to the territory and push hard on the drugs. And it started in my community, being the closest to the south with a highway connection. We did our best to try and stop that, but it's now expanded into virtually every community in the territory, even those without road access. And it's becoming a real epidemic. We had one community where 6 people died in a week, and there's 700 people in that community. So everyone is impacted. My community, we've had, maybe I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand it over to Premier Main. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of youth in Nunavut, I'd like to point out that we have a very youthful population. If you look at the demographic pyramid for Nunavut, it's very broad at the base. And so we have you look to the future, those youth are going to grow up, they're going to finish school, hopefully, and they're going to move into the workforce. So that's one of the key challenges that we're facing, is providing enough infrastructure, enough opportunity for this huge number of youth that are currently living in Nunavut, making sure that their mental health needs are being taken care of. We have a very sad and gripping crisis in terms of suicide in the territory, and it's, suicide isn't something that we will eliminate or solve through healthcare alone. It needs to be multifaceted. It needs to be around economic opportunity, educational opportunity, the ability to build careers for themselves and their families. So I don't want to lean on the negative too much. There's so many talented, smart youth across Nunavut. They are the future. They're inspiring to politicians like me. And in terms of the challenges they're facing, it's multifaceted. And again, I just want to stress just the fact that so much of our population is in that youth demographic. That is something that puts a lot of pressure on the territorial government in keeping up.
That's why I wanted to frame it that way, because of course addictions and mental health issues are not just a youth issue, but when you have that high percentage and that high proportion of youth, and also when you have the need to depend on people for your future who are in that stage of life, it becomes hard. And I just want to give you an opportunity, just to the end of my time, just along that, is there, what can Canadians do to support you on this journey?
I think the Team Canada approach to the Arctic, to the north, is needed. Like, we need Southern Canadians to understand Nunavut, and then we need you as advocates. We only have a single MP who does a very good job, but we need Southern Canadians. We need allies, and it can be someone from Toronto, it can be someone from Vancouver, who understands the North, who sees the potential, sees the opportunity, and sees the need to bring Nunavut residents, to bring Northerners up to the same standard that can be seen in southern Canada.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We finally go to MP Rob Oliphant. You have 5 minutes.
I think I'm fine. The premiers have had a long day, and I thank you for your work all the time, but especially today, and hope to get you involved in things like the Arctic Council. Thanks.
I join MP Oliphant and all my colleagues in thanking you for your appearance before the committee and for your testimony. We will now briefly suspend the meeting so that we can go in camera, but I wanted to, on behalf of all my colleagues, to thank you for making the time to answer questions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.